So I interviewed Tim Canova against who's facing Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I didn't even know there was an independent running. So Stephanie Anderson, you're also running in that race against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Obviously, we know about that her, kind of deceitfulness and shady behavior has been spotlighted. Canova, his profile is being raised. What are you offering? Obviously different than Wasserman Schultz, but also Tim.
Well, let's start with Wasserman Schultz first. I'm offering a candidate that's present, engaged in the community, that's active in the community, who has a pulse on the needs of the community.
I should say it's parts of Broward County and Miami-Dade County.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. And I have solutions. Some of the things that were discussed here on this on the platform with the Green Party line up to what we are very interested in doing. For instance, we want to make the student loan program going forward refundable tax credits, sort of like what we did with the home buyer's tax credit. And if a student graduates within 5 years, then they can take the next 5 years to take those payments against their federal income taxes. We also want to make sure that mental health care is available to all children regardless of income and circumstances, and nonprofit-driven mental health access. We are very active in the GMO fight. We have a petition in front of the White House with over 100,000 signatures on it asking that President Obama veto the DARK Act, which he chose to sign, but we were able to get a response from the president in 2 weeks as opposed to the 60 days that they are given to reply to that. And I think that it was because he realized that the voice of the American people were going to continue on this issue until he spoke.
So Florida was ground zero for the housing crash, and obviously climate change is a big problem. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in the area working 2 or 3 jobs. A lot of people don't have good health care down there. Your governor hasn't accepted the Medicaid from Obamacare. If you were to go into Congress, economically, how would you bring relief, pretty quickly?
Okay, so one of the things that we would do would be to fight for larger minimum wage. Florida has a high percentage of service workers, which means that they are wait staff, they are staff that are at below the $7.25 minimum wage. They're in the $2 minimum wage range. And that was really put in place by one person's lobbying to create that lower standard of wage. So one of the things that I would do would be to fight to raise both of those minimum wages, in addition to the student loan program. And then also we need to have better access to vocational training. In the areas that my district lie in, we have a lot of underemployment. And we could solve that by allowing technical programs and community-based community college programs, those kind of things, to be more easily accessible to Floridians in general. We also need to make sure that we have more of our students having access to an education, because literally we can eradicate poverty in this nation by just investing in education. Dr. Stein just pointed out that for every $1 that we put into higher education, we get a $7 return on that investment. And you have to wonder or ask yourself, why are our leaders, why are our legislators not exploring that more?
In terms of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I'm not down in that district, but I've heard and I kind of know there's a lot of money down there in certain parts. It's pretty traditionally Democrat. Hillary Clinton beat Bernie Sanders in that district, I think 68 to 30s. So it's kind of establishment. But there are also, rundown areas. There's a lot of Latinos in the area. So when you have the Tim Canovas of the world and yourself kind of trying to put a spotlight on this congresswoman hasn't done anything for you in, probably 3 or 4 years. She's basically been fundraising for the Democratic Party and going on TV. What is what is the wake-up call that you need to tell even people that like her that they're not being served and their interests aren't being served?
Well, I will tell you that one of the biggest wake-up calls for me was when she had the problem that she did with the DNC, and she still refused to come back home to her district. She stayed and she tried to maintain the position and the power that she did have. And understanding that my district votes heavily Democratic and I'm an independent, I had to have a Daniel politic moment myself.
What does that mean?
That means that Daniel in the Bible, and Daniel put the welfare of the state, and he did what was right no matter what. And so that's one of the reasons why I am supporting Tim Canova during the primary race, because to have more options in November would be better than having no options in November. And as it stands now, if the election were held today, Debbie would beat Tim by 8 points. And because the Democratic candidate normally takes the district, it has behooved me to be able to represent my my supporters the best, to make sure that we have 2 dogs in this fight as opposed to 1.
So I just want to be clear, you are running against Tim and Debbie, but you say you support him.
Well, currently I'm running against nobody, because I'm running against Debbie. She's the incumbent, and the Republican candidate hasn't been chosen.
Right.
So I'm supporting Tim because Tim is running against Debbie.
Right. So basically, you're the independent for the general election, and Tim is up against Debbie now. Last question, kind of when you look at Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but the broader electorate, you're what I would call a Bernie-crat, one of these progressive men and women, pretty much, who either for the first time are getting involved or were cynical before, and people like Bernie, people like Jill Stein have awoken and, kind of given a kick in the ass, for lack of a better word. It seems like the media now, since Bernie's out, is basically going back to the same template. It's all it is anti-Trump all day long. There's not a lot of talk about money in politics anymore. Young Turks talks about it all the time, but, the mainstream. Do you think this issue and the issues that have been circulating, do you worry that, kind of without electoral success, let's say Tim doesn't win and it's pretty much the establishment maintains, that people are just going to kind of be deflated, or you think this movement is not turning back?
I don't think that this movement is turning back, and I'll give you a perfect example. I would not be considered a Bernie-crat. I would be considered a Bernie conservative. Okay. I'm fiscally conservative, and so, but I think that what Bernie spoke to is the fact that that this government is for the people, by the people, and as long as we have a corporate based political system where money drives our elections, then we're going to continue to get establishment type candidates. And I think that by having my voice and other independent voices in this race, it forces them to keep the topics open and keep the fact that we have police brutality of our citizens in the news, keep the fact that we have a income disparity, keep the fact that we have economic and environmental terrorism going on our shores. And in our very government, when you can have a company come out and pay hundreds of millions of dollars to the House and the Senate, and then they suddenly come together to pass laws that are contrary to the interests of the American voters who sent them there. And so I think that it's important to have a multitude of voices in this cycle, but I do believe that the voices that have entered into politics this time around will not be going away. I think millennials have found that without voting, that their efforts are in vain, and so getting out and supporting a candidate is very important, but also engaging others and voting as well.
Thanks again.
Thank you.